She kissed me goodnight like she always did, soft, warm, familiar, her lips brushing mine with the practiced ease of habit. If I hadn't known better, I'd have believed it. But the envelope under her pillow told me otherwise. It felt like a small, private rebellion, knowing it was there while she lay beside me, pretending our world was intact. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her even breathing as she drifted to sleep. My mind raced, and the bitterness curled in my stomach like a coiled snake. I'd had doubts for months, those little nagging thoughts that come unbidden in the quiet moments of the day. A late meeting here, a suspicious text there, but never anything solid. Not until last week. The proof came from a friend of mine, Jeremy. He'd seen her across town in a cafe, laughing in a way I hadn't seen her laugh with me in years. Her hand was on his wrist, her face illuminated by something more than the soft lighting. Jeremy snapped a photo and sent it to me with a question mark. I stared at it for hours that night, convincing myself it wasn't what it looked like. But then I started digging. The lies unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Bank statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel stays in the middle of the week, and a lingerie receipt from a boutique she'd always complained was overpriced. The damning piece was a text exchange I found when she left her phone on the kitchen counter to grab a glass of water. One message, from a contact labeled, "Claire, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Claire." A placeholder, of course. But the tone and timing confirmed everything I needed to know. I didn't confront her immediately. That would have been too easy, too cathartic. No, I wanted her to feel it, the weight of what she'd done, the destruction she'd brought into our lives. I spent the next few days planning, deciding how to lay my trap. I needed her to understand just how much she'd underestimated me, how thoroughly I'd pieced together the puzzle. That's how I ended up slipping the envelope under her pillow tonight. Inside was everything, printouts of the text messages, receipts, photos of her with him, and a final note written in my hand. "Good night, sweetheart. I'm done being your fool." Morning came slowly. I woke before her and pretended to check my phone while I waited for her to stir. Her hair was a tangle on the pillow, her face peaceful and unburdened. The sight of her made my stomach churn, the audacity of her calm, the gall of her deceit. When she finally opened her eyes and smiled at me, I forced myself to smile back. "Morning," she murmured, stretching lazily. "Morning," I replied, my voice even. She reached under her pillow for her phone, and her hand brushed the envelope. Her brow furrowed, and she pulled it out, staring at it like it was a foreign object. "What's this?" she asked, sitting up. "Open it," I said. Her fingers trembled as she peeled the flap open. She unfolded the papers and began to read. I watched her face change, the color draining, her lips parting slightly as her breath quickened. By the time she reached the end, her hands were shaking so badly the papers crinkled audibly. "Mark," she whispered, her voice thin. "Yes, dear," I said, my tone dripping with venom. She looked at me, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "I can explain." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made her flinch. "Oh, I'm sure you can. Go ahead, Claire. Or should I call you by your real name, Emily? Or perhaps, cheating wife, will suffice." "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Not what it looks like." I shot back, standing and looming over her. "You've been sneaking around, lying to my face, spending our money on hotel rooms and dinners with another man. What part of that isn't what it looks like?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away sharply. "Don't," I said, my voice cold. "You don't get to touch me. Not after this." "Mark, please," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. I love you. It didn't mean anything." I shook my head. "You don't get to downplay this. You don't get to rewrite the narrative. You made your choices, Emily, and now you'll deal with the consequences." I walked to the dresser and picked up a second envelope. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Divorce papers," I said, tossing them onto the bed. "I had them drawn up yesterday. Sign 'em or don't, it doesn't matter. I'm leaving, and you're going to explain to everyone why our marriage fell apart." She collapsed onto the bed, sobbing into her hands. I didn't feel pity, only a grim satisfaction. For years, I'd been the steady one, the loyal one, the husband who kept the wheels turning while she chased her whims. And this was my reward. Infidelity and lies. I grabbed my pre-packed bag and headed for the door. Oh, one more thing, I said, turning back. I've sent copies of everything to your parents. I thought they'd appreciate knowing the truth about the perfect daughter. Her head snapped up, her eyes wild with panic. Mark, no, you can't. I already did, I said, stepping out and slamming the door behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The world she'd so carefully constructed was already crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was spectacular. Her parents called me, shocked and apologetic, asking if there was anything they could do. Her friends, the ones who hadn't known or hadn't condoned her behavior, reached out to offer their support. But Emily, she was silent. I heard through mutual acquaintances that her lover had dumped her once he realized she was exposed. She'd lost her social standing, her reputation, and the respect of everyone who mattered to her. Meanwhile, I moved on. It wasn't easy, but it was liberating. For the first time in years, I felt free. In the end, Emily's betrayal was a turning point. It hurt, yes, but it also reminded me of my worth. I deserved better, and now, finally, I could pursue it without the weight of her deceit dragging me down. As for her, she'd have to live with the consequences of her actions. And that, I thought, was the most satisfying revenge of all.